Hi, my name is William Opioke. I'm the catering chef here at Augusta Health. I'm going to be walking you through a really vegetable heavy, very vegetable heavy stir fry. A lot of good flavors, very fast cooking time, so we are probably going to be prepping our vegetables more than we're going to actually be cooking them, so we lock in a lot of flavor. You see I got a variety of vegetables here. Some of them have already been prepared. Mushrooms have already been sliced. I have some shredded carrots and some broccoli florets already done. You can get those available at any grocery store kind of already prepared, and if it cuts down on your prep time, then feel free to snag them. I'm going to be using squash, zucchini, peppers, and onions in this recipe, and I'll be preparing those. The texture of the vegetables is all relatively the same. So what we can do is prep these all, which I'll be doing, putting them in one mixing bowl so that when it comes time to cook, we can cook them all at one time. So we'll start with our zucchini here. These vary in size. This one's a pretty large zucchini. We're only gonna need about a cup of this. So I'll probably just cut this in half. I'm gonna cut that end off right there. Now I'm gonna be cooking this on a bias, or in the book it'll say diagonally cut if you're following along in the cookbook. So what I'll do is, as we've discussed before, round things don't cut well because they'll roll, so I'm making myself flat surfaces. I cut it in half, so now I have a nice flat surface. Now in order to cut this on a bias, I like to keep my vegetables straight, and instead of coming down like this, I just tilt my knife inward slightly. Making nice, slow, even cuts. You don't need to work fast. Then we can take these and we're going to put them in our prep bowl. So it's going to be about a cup of zucchini. We're also going to have about a cup of yellow squash. Yellow squash tend to be a little bit on the smaller side, so I would be using most of this. I'm gonna cut the ends off there. And I'm gonna do the same thing. Again, this is round, so I'm gonna make myself a flat surface. Just cut down on an angle. Yellow squash has a little bit more seeds than zucchini does. They're larger, and they tend to soften up a little bit more. I know people that aren't keen on the texture, so if you don't like the texture of yellow squash but you enjoy zucchini, then you can eliminate this. They do get a lot softer during the cooking process, but they are very delicious. Next, we're going to be doing about a cup of bell pepper. I have a red pepper and an orange pepper here. You can use either one that you like. I personally picked the orange pepper right now for the size. It makes it easier to cut. For this, I'm actually going to, if you look top down on a pepper, you can see it's kind of even though it's round, it kind of has a box to it. It has 4 sides. So an easy way to cut the pepper is just to start at the top. And if you imagine a square around that green top, you can come straight down. And you've kind of bypassed all those seeds, and it makes your clean out work a little easier. Then from here, you can see where the seeds are and just kind of go on the edge, just like that. And then this bottom part, you can see, and you just cut all around that. We're not gonna use it, so we'll just pop that over here. And then we got nice, clean sides that we're going to be cutting into strips, or julienne, or cut into strips. I'm cutting these on an angle. You can, because of we have the flat shape right here, it's kind of in a rectangle. You could cut them straight up and down if you'd like. There's no reason to, as long as they're cut into strips. We want to try and make our cuts as even as possible, so that will ensure that our vegetables are all cooking appropriately at the same time. And because the cook on this is so quick, We're going to want to make sure that everything has a good crunch to it and everything's evenly cooked. A cup of broccoli florets, we're going to add that. If you have some that are a little too big, like these two, we can take these smaller ones and add them. Oop. You can just take a small knife or whatever knife you're working with and just kind of cut them down a little bit smaller size. Just like that. Now, same with the carrots. I bought these shredded. If you have regular carrots at home, longer carrots at home, you just peel them and you would cut them on a bias similar to the squash that we did. We're gonna also be putting in about 1 cup of yellow onion. Again, round vegetables, so we're going to come down. We're gonna we need to make flat surfaces for ourselves. We're gonna cut this top off, and from here, I'm gonna cut this in half. This onion is about an average size yellow onion, so this will get us about what we need. It'll be a little bit more than a cup, but that's okay. So I'm gonna peel this first layer off. Get rid of what some people call the paper. And then I'm gonna pick one more layer down. This first layer on an onion, this outer layer, tends to be a little bit softer. I don't know if you can see how it's a little thinner there. It doesn't cook up as nicely. It's great for stock. You can save it and use it, but it won't cook up very nicely. On my flat surface, I'm gonna come in at a slight angle, and I'm going to cut the root off, just that tiny little bit. Going to turn it so the onion the layers are all lined up this way so that when I cut down, we'll have nice strips. Now they're sticking together now, but once we start cooking them, those little slivers will break apart, and so those little layers will separate once they start getting in the heat, so it's okay. Alternatively, you can leave the root on there. You can slice down in thin strips this way. Now all those pieces are together because we didn't cut the root. So the root's still intact. So all those little slivers are still intact. And then you can come down and cut off just like we did before. Now we're also going to be adding a cup of sliced mushrooms. I personally prefer a lot of mushrooms in my stir fry. They have a really nice, what's called an umami flavor, savory flavor. I think they cook up very, very nicely, and that's very, very delicious. Now we're going to, in a separate, so these are all of our vegetables that we prepped that are going to be cooking all together at the same time. This recipe also calls for garlic and ginger. So first I'm going to just give the garlic, chop up the garlic. I'll be using about a tablespoon. Depending on the size of your cloves, you can kind of see that they vary in size. I would say that 2 of these larger ones, that's looking at about a tablespoon right there. If you have smaller ones, then obviously you can cut it more, or you can cut more up if you need them. You can take these on a grater and grate the garlic. I prefer to actually just have it going from the top down. We have the root here, which we aren't going to use. And just cutting really thin slices until we get to the bottom, and we can just put that to the side. We're going to keep these together in this little pile. I'm going to do one more One more clove. Then for this, I'm just gonna run my knife over it just to chop them up a little bit more. A mince is just a very fine chop, and some people tend to do it in a food processor, but with this small amount, you can just run your knife over it a couple times. This is more than adequate for the application that we're doing. I'm gonna put this in a bowl, small little bowl off to the side. Now this, you may have seen at the store, this is what fresh ginger looks like. I advise people to use fresh ginger and don't ever get it already processed. They tend to put extra things in it when it gets processed. It's a very hardy root to have in your fridge. You can hold on to it for a long time, and it looks intimidating to cut up, to clean because of the shape, but it's very, very easy to do. Depending on the shape that you have, you can see it's very much varied. This recipe calls for about 2 tablespoons of grated ginger. If you're looking at the pieces here, this section, if you get a piece that's probably about as big as a thumb, that's a really good indication. It's about 1 tablespoon is about a piece of ginger that's probably about as big as your thumb. This section here looks great for what we're gonna do, and ginger is very easy to work with in this regard. You just break off what you need, you put away what you don't need. So I'm gonna break it off at these little junctions right there where it's sprouting off. Peeling ginger is very easy. You can take a peeler to it, but the easiest way is just grab a spoon. And if you just take a spoon, actually I'm gonna come towards me, and you can just get that brown layer off. There's a definite color change, so you'll know if you're peeling it correctly. And you will be able to smell it if you're peeling it correctly, because it is a wonderful fresh smell. Ginger is very fibrous. It is wonderful to put in food, but it does have a lot of fibers to it. So I'm gonna show you 2 ways that you could process it for this recipe. The first, we talked earlier about it, round shapes being hard to cut. It is harder to cut ginger because it's not really a round shape. It's just kind of an odd shape. So I just hold it the best I can, and I'll just do 1 little slice very slowly so it doesn't roll on me. You probably heard it crunching a lot. There are a lot. It is a very fibrous thing to work with. So from here, what I would do is I would cut it again, very small, julienne it into thin strips. You can kind of see some of these fibers that are there. And then from here, I'll go even smaller. Right there. Similar to how we would do the garlic, we could just run the knife over it and just chop it up smaller. If you don't mind chewing on the larger pieces of ginger, you can certainly cut this larger. I don't mind. I like a nice crunch of ginger in my stir fry. It's a personal preference. Feel free to chop it up small. If you want to grate it, you just get a grater like this over your bowl, and then grating your ginger like this is going to break it up, and it will release a lot more of the flavor. So if you want some more of that ginger bite, you can certainly do this. That's gonna be more than enough for our application. But you can see the fibers that have been left behind in there. There's a lot of juice in there. But grating it will break it up more, and you'll get a lot more of the ginger flavor in there when you do it. Now, garlic and ginger are very similar in how they cook, so I tend to pair them together. And when we are cooking in this recipe, you'll see we'll add the vegetables first. We're gonna let them cook for a little bit, and then we're going to add our garlic and ginger. We have some other things we're gonna be adding as well, but because of how they cook, we're going to stagger how we put these ingredients into the skillet. I have my skillet heating up with a little bit of oil. I've prepped the vegetables up, and as you can tell, it's a pretty large volume of vegetables. This kind of prep could be done ahead of time, about 3 days ahead of time if you'd like, and you can cut these up and have them in your fridge, and if you're using 1 or 2 portions, just pull out what you need. I'm only gonna be taking a couple portions out for this. We're gonna do the cooking on this is high and fast. Stir fries are generally really high heat, really quick movement. We don't want to overload our pan because we're not trying to steam the vegetables. And we want them to have good crunch. We don't want them to be overcooked. So I got a really high heat. We want our oil almost smoking. If you like, this is the bowl that I'm going to be using for service. So if you want to ahead of time, if you know how big of a portion you need, you can go ahead and portion this out while your skillet's getting hot. These are gonna cook down, and we're gonna be adding more vegetables to it. So this is probably a perfect volume for this. Now that our skillet's hot and our oil is just about to smoke, we can go in with our vegetables. Now again, we don't want to overload our pan. We want our veggies to be able to move around. We're gonna let them set. While this is cooking, we have a couple other vegetables we're going to add at a later time in the process. These are snow peas. The recipe you might be following along with called for asparagus, but it's winter when we're filming this, so the asparagus is not the best quality. Snow peas are a great substitution. Just make sure you get snow peas. They're the thin ones. Snap peas are the larger ones. They're a lot more fibrous and don't cook up as nicely. And we also have bean sprouts here. Now both of these cook very quickly, so they're gonna be one of the last things we're gonna add. About halfway through cooking the vegetables, you'll start to see the onions turn clear, the mushrooms look like they're softening up a little bit, and the things start to kind of wilt, and we're going to soften up, and we're going to add, at this point, we're going to be adding our garlic and our ginger. If you add garlic and ginger too soon, it will have a tendency to burn. And so we want to avoid that bitter flavor that comes along with that. But it doesn't take long. We're going to let that cook just a little bit. Now we're going to add our snow peas to this. Give that a little stir. The steam from the vegetables is going to help steam those snow peas. And our bean sprouts, we're going to add at the end. Same thing. Once the veggies all the veggies start to soften up, and we start to get some color on the bottom of the pan from the garlic and ginger, to this, you can add some crushed red pepper if you like. I find that the ginger provides enough heat for the recipe, so you don't really need the extra spice of the crushed red pepper is optional. But to finish off the cooking, we're gonna add some rice wine vinegar. It's about a half a cup of rice wine vinegar. And we wanna stir that vinegar around, help get all those flavors off the bottom of the pan. That's gonna steam really quickly. I would advise, if you're adding the vinegar, kind of stand away. Hot vinegar steam is not the best thing to smell. it will clear out your sinuses. But when it cooks down, wonderful flavor. So we're gonna cook this till there's just about no liquid left, which will happen very, very quickly. And in fact, at this stage, while it's on the heat, you can even turn your heat off on your stove and just let the pan cook the vegetables the rest of the way. It's a very, very quick cooking process. And this is done. So we'll be ready to plate right now. Now that we've plated up and our stir fry is already done, we can garnish it with little fresh scallions, green onions. We don't need a lot to garnish this, but it does provide a nice little pop at the end. For these, are really easy to clean. Generally, you'll pick, depending on how nice of a scallion you have, some of these offshoots to the side, they get a little soft, and we don't want that. We want the crunch, we want the bite of the green onion. So these are in pretty good shape. I'm just gonna chop these wiltier, softer ends off. I'll just come down here and get rid of this. Again, something that you could save for stock. Now I'll keep all these kind of lined up, and then I mentioned earlier in the video that the veggie prep for this can be done ahead of time. This is something, prepping this, I would not do these ahead of time. After they're cut, they tend to get a lot softer. And so I would just cut these as you needed them. So for this, we'll just garnish with a little fresh green onion. You can use as much or as little as you like. And there you go. A wonderful stir fry. You can have it warm. You can actually serve this cold as a nice little side, and it's very vegetable rich, a lot of great textures there, a lot of great flavors. So for this and other heart healthy recipes, please visit us at AugustaHealth.com.